So the Canadian federal government and BC government just announced that they're spending nearly $1.5 billion to buy unsold condos in Vancouver. And this sounds great, right? We have an affordability housing crisis. It's going to be solved. Well, that is not even close because this is a textbook developer bailout. And BC taxpayers, they're going to be footing 90% of the bill. So I'm going to break down exactly what's happening here, who's really paying for it, and why. Because even if you support government housing investment, which I do, this specific plan is the wrong call. So let's start at the beginning. On June 18th and 19th, Prime Minister Mark Carney and BC Premier David Eby stood together and announced what they're calling the Canada-British Columbia Partnership on Condo Conversion. And the pitch was straightforward. Buy up to 2,200 vacant condos that are sitting unsold across BC and convert them into affordable housing through a rent-to-own program. The Prime Minister's office described it as, and I quote, one of the fastest and most efficient ways to increase housing supply. And it sounds efficient, sounds fast. But here's the problem. As of this recording, the actual program details still haven't been released. We don't know the price per unit purchase price. We don't know whether the government is negotiating any discount off the asking price or if they're paying full ask. We don't know who decides which condos get purchased or what criteria are being used. The government's answers to every one of those questions has been, we'll have details for you in the fall. So remember that, because we're going to come back to it. Now, let's talk about the numbers. The total program cost is going to be $1.45 billion. The federal government share, they're going to be kicking in 10%, so $145 million. BC taxpayer share, that's going to be 90% or $1.3 billion. So let that sink in. 90% of this so-called federal housing program is being paid for by one province, British Columbia. And this is a province that has added $30 billion to its debt this year alone. A province paying $6.5 billion a year just in interest on that debt. In a province where the average family is already paying $450 more in taxes this year than they were last year. That's who's writing the check for 90% of this program. All right, so I'm going to back up now and ask the obvious question. Why are there thousands of empty condos sitting around Vancouver in the first place? Well, according to CHMC data from May 2026, there's almost 6,000 unabsorbed apartment units across BC. And nearly 4,500 of those, that's 75% of all vacant units in the entire province, are sitting in Metro Vancouver alone, which isn't surprising. Now, here's what's important to understand about these units. These are not luxury penthouse units with ocean views that nobody can afford. A lot of these are what people in the industry have started calling dog crate condos. These are very small studios and one-bedroom units under 500 square feet, crappy floor plans, built and priced on a per square foot basis, which were designed specifically to optimize for investor flips or investments, not for people who actually want a home to live in. So think about what that means for a second. These units weren't built because there was real demand for them. They were built because investors were buying pre-construction units during the boom years, many of them hoping to flip them on a profit. And developers were happy to keep supplying what the speculative market was absorbing. Then interest rates rose. At the investor demand, it collapsed. And suddenly, all of that supply had nowhere to go. So what do developers do in this situation? Well, they haven't dropped the price. Many are still asking well over $1,000 a square foot in many cases, even though the real market value today, given the current rates and the actual buyer demand, is likely hundreds of dollars per square foot below that. So the developers, they're holding. They're refusing to take a loss. They're waiting for someone to blink. And as it turns out, the government blinked first. So now let me show you the difference between what's supposed to happen and what this program actually does. In a normal functioning market, here's the typical sequence of events. Developers, they overbuilt speculative inventory. So when interest rates rise, demand falls. Prices drop because they have to until buyers come back into the market at a price that makes sense for them. And then developers absorb losses on the inventory that they mispriced or can no longer sell. Banks absorb the losses on the loans that they made to developers who were overextended. Supply clears and real affordability improves. Not because the government wrote a check, but because the market found its true pricing level. That's how it's supposed to work. But here's what this program does instead. The government, they're stepping in before that correction can fully play out. It buys up the inventory at or near current asking prices. And that means developers don't have to take a loss. They don't have to face the reality of the market that they were partially responsible for. And they get made whole by taxpayers. So here's the pattern that should matter to you. When the market goes up, developers, they get to keep the upside. Every dollar of appreciation, every flip profit, every assignment sale, that's a private gain. But when the market goes down, it looks like taxpayers are going to be absorbing the downside. That is not a free market. That is socializing losses and privatizing profits. And it sends a signal to every other developer in this country, build what you want, price it how you want. And if you guess wrong, hold your position for long enough and wait for the government to come and rescue you. And if you're too big to fail, or if you have the right government connections, you're going to get bailed out. So let's go back to the details that were missing in the press release, because I want to spend some time there, because I think this is genuinely the most concerning part of the whole thing. The government, they committed $1.45 billion of taxpayer money to this program. And here's what they've not told us. How much will they pay per unit? Not disclosed. What discount, if any, are they negotiating off the asking price? It's unknown. Who decides which condos get purchased and on what criteria? It's unclear. What happens if property values continue to fall after the government buys in? There's no plan announced. And who absorbs the losses if these rent-to-own units underperform over time? The answer to that last one is the most important, and it's the most obvious. It's taxpayers, by default, because there's nobody else left holding the bag after that. The government's answer to all 5 of those questions so far is, we're going to release the details in the fall. The fall, after the summer parliamentary recess. After this story has had 4 or 5 months to fade from the news cycle, after most Canadians have moved on to other news. That's a pattern. Announce the headline with maximum fanfare, defer the accountability until nobody's watching anymore. Now, here's the detail that I find the most revealing of everything in this story. Not every developer is celebrating this program. In fact, some are actively distancing themselves from it. Brad Jones, he's the Chief Development Officer at West Group Properties. They're one of the largest developers in BC. And they told CBC directly, if the industry wanted a bailout, we would have asked for it. So read that again. The industry didn't ask for this. The government designed and offered this program entirely on its own. So if developers didn't ask for it, who exactly is this for? That's a question I'd genuinely like to see answered at a parliamentary hearing. So a motion was called for a series of hearings. Let's bring in the BC Housing Minister, bring in the Federal Housing Minister, bring in those condo developers who are going to benefit from the program. Let's get some answers on the record. The Conservatives voted yes. Bloc Québécois voted yes. And even the NDP supported it. Think about that coalition of groups for a second. These are parties that agree on almost nothing, all saying the same thing. This program needs to be investigated. And then the Liberals, they used their majority on the committee to shut the whole thing down. There was one motion, one vote, meeting adjourned. No hearings, no ministers called, no developers questioned, no paper trail examined. So when a government refuses to answer questions about where $1 billion is going, that is not transparency. Now, I want to step back from the outrage machine there for a second, because I am not against government playing a role in housing. I want to be really clear about that. Targeted, well-designed government investment in affordable housing supply is one of the most effective policy tools that exists. This country, it has a real housing affordability crisis right now, and the government does have a real role to play in solving it. My problem is not that the government showed up. My problem is what they bought and what they paid for it. Think about the math here. These are investor-grade speculative units, small, square foot optimized, built to flip, and the government is buying them at prices close to peak market value, which means taxpayers are paying a premium for a product that was never designed to be affordable in the first place. Compare that to the alternative. Take that same $1.5 billion and put it into purpose-built, non-market affordable housing, built on public land, developed through nonprofit or cooperative housing organizations at land cost rather than developer margin-inflated condo pricing. That same money, deployed differently, likely produces significantly more units because there's no developer profit margin embedded in the price. It produces housing that's permanently affordable, not market rate units that the government is temporarily holding that could re-enter the speculative market down the road. And it produces units that are actually designed to be someone's long-term home, not optimized for an investor's investment. And here's the detail that I keep coming back to, the one that really crystallizes the problem for me. Around the same time, BC committed $1.3 billion to this condo buyout, the province paused or canceled roughly $1.4 billion in community housing fund investment. That's the fund specifically designed to support nonprofit affordable housing development. Think about what just happened here. $1.4 billion gone from real affordable housing construction, $1.3 billion redirected back towards speculative developer inventory at near peak prices. That's almost a dollar for dollar swap. From building permanent purpose-built affordable housing to rescuing inventory that was never meant to be affordable in the first place. So to me, it looks like this is one of the most transparent transfers of wealth from regular Canadians to real estate insiders that I've seen possibly ever. Even if you think government should be deeply involved in housing, and I do, this still wasn't the right way to spend nearly $1.5 billion. If you found this useful, please give it a like and share it with your mom. The more people who understand and what's happening here, the better. So that's it for this video. I'm Kyle, a real estate broker in Toronto. If you need any help buying, selling, or renting a property, please get in touch. Thanks for watching.